we'll go ahead and call federal state affairs to order Tuesday, March 8th. First thing on the agenda, bill introductions. Do we have any bill introductions? Okay, that's great. We'll move on to our hearing on 2540. It's a similar bill to one we passed earlier. Jason, why don't you explain it and go from there?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Yes, 2540 will look very familiar to this committee as you pass this identical bill out as Senate Bill 330 earlier this session. That bill went over and got referred to the House Committee on Veterans Affairs. I am not sure if they've taken action on it yet, but it is over in the House awaiting action. So 2540 is the bill that requires the Capital Preservation Committee to approve plans for the construction of a permanent memorial honoring the Kansas Gold Star families on the state capitol grounds. Again, no public funds would be used for this. There would be a special fund set up in the state treasury for donations, gifts, grants, bequests to pay for the design and construction of the memorial. Senate Bill 330 did pass the Senate by a vote of 40-0. This bill 2540 passed the House of Representatives by a vote of 113-0. It would go in effect sooner than July 1st. It would go into effect on Kansas Register if enacted. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Jason? Senator Reichman.
Thank you very much. Just a reminder, these are for families that have lost a member.
That's correct.
In the service of the country. I guess my other question is, are we doing it, this will probably go to you, are we just doing this so we can help along? They're being slow in the House or anything you want to share on that? Thank you.
I didn't want to say anything about the House because I know how touchy they can be, but one of these bills will become law. And so we got the bill, we got time. I'd like to hear this and maybe even work it since every member of the committee signed onto it. And we've heard identical bill. I'd probably allow it to be worked today because if we can, to clean our work up, it's identical bill as prior. So unless there's problems, I would think we would do that. Any questions for Jason? Senator Fasco-Doe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jason, thank you. So this is not to put the memorial up, it's just to allow them to raise money for it. Is that correct?
No, it's for the actual placement of it's to approve the Capital Preservation Committee to move forward. They've already approved the memorial, I believe, but this is the final step in the authorizations to get it designed and constructed and placed on the Capitol grounds.
Mr. Chairman, Jason, was it determined where at in the Capitol yet?
I think that's part of the design and placement process with the Capital Preservation Committee, and I'm not sure if they've actually selected the site on the Capitol grounds or not at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And just to kind of jump back a little bit to Senator Reichman's question, I'd prefer it to be the Senate bill since there was 38 of us on it, but we're going to have this ready to use to make sure it's done. So, not seeing any more questions, we'll go ahead and start the hearing. First proponent, General Perry Wiggins.
Yes, sir. I'm primarily here to say thanks, Mr. Chair, and to the committee for really approving Senate Bill 330. To answer the question that was previously asked, we've already decided on the place with the facilities individuals in the State Preservation Historic Committee. It's going to go in the Veterans Walkway. So it's already a footprint established for our veterans, and this will enable us to recognize the Gold Star mothers. So I will tell you another thing, the reason I wanted to be up here is a lot of people have correlated this particular monument to the veterans of OIF, Operation Enduring Freedom, and Operation Iraqi Freedom. That's not necessarily the case. It includes World War I veterans, World War II veterans. It includes Korea, Vietnam, and those two wars I just talked about. What we fail to recognize in a lot of cases in our military is that service is a team sport. And for example, one of the members that I met that was a part of a veterans service organization, he was the son of a Vietnam pilot that was shot down when he was about 6 months old. He never met his father, but he has a great connection to his father and his service. So we can't forget the fact that we're not just recognizing those that wear the cloth now that are fallen in combat. Kansas has had a great history of wrapping their arms around fellow Kansans that have suffered a loss. So thank you very much, and I appreciate it, the opportunity. I appreciate all the hard work that's going on, and recognizing that I'm a neophyte in this process and that there's two separate bills out there. I still think it's significantly important that we push this through as quickly as possible, and I do appreciate what the Senate's doing, and specifically your committee, Mr. Chair. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Reichman?
Thank you for coming. I just thought I'd let you know that we have started a Veterans Caucus. We met this morning between the House and Senate. And so if you want to talk to me more later, we talk about different veterans bills and so on, and different groups and whatever. But thank you for your testimony.
Well, thank you, sir.
Any further questions or comments? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Are there any further proponents, opponents, neutrals? We'll go ahead and close the hearing. Let's go ahead and take action. I think Senator Longbind's got a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you allowing us to work this bill today. It did receive 40 votes in the Senate. It did receive 113 to 0 in the House. As General Wiggins said, I know the committee would very much like to get going on this, so I would move that we pass out House Bill 2540 favorably for passage, and since it appears to be very non-confrontational, place it on the consent calendar.
Do I have a second? Senator Peterson seconds. Any questions or comments? All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Against nay, it passes. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead. We got 3 more bills that we're going to look at and see if we want to work. Senate Bill 389. And Jason, why don't you give us an overview of that bill? I got the same ring.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Senate Bill 389 was the bill to require the use of an individual, durable, voter-verified paper ballot with a distinctive watermark for all elections. The requirements under the bill would that the ballot be marked by hand or by use of a marking or printing device or system. It would be subject to inspection and verification by the voter before it is cast and counted, and would be canvassed by hand or by a vote tabulating equipment. The bill would also provide that the paper ballots would be preserved and constitute the official ballot for all audit and recount purposes. To the extent there's any inconsistencies in the vote tallies, the paper ballot will be deemed the true and correct record of the vote cast. And all recount would be by hand count unless the requester elects not to have a recount counted by a hand. If the ballots are tabulated by machine, then there would be a required hand count audit of a sample of the ballots in accordance with rules and regulations adopted by the Secretary of State. And the bill finally also prohibits the use of any poll books that do not require a handwritten signature. If enacted, the bill would go into effect on July 1st.
Okay, what's the pleasure of the committee? Oh, wait, is there any questions of Jason? Not seeing any? Go ahead, Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize, I don't have an amendment in writing, but so this will be a conceptual one.
I'll allow it.
And I've talked to Jason, the reviser, about it. This conceptual amendment, instead of, it'll have an enacting date for the rules and regs for the Secretary of State's office would be 2023, and the implementation of the actual bill would be 2024 for the watermark ballots.
So you're allowing them, it's a watermark bill. Okay, go ahead and re-explain your amendment. Explain a little bit of the bill, so make sure everybody knows.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what the amendment will do is for the rules and regulations part of this bill for the Secretary of State's office to adopt for the watermark ballots would be January 2023, January 1st, 2023. And then for the implementation of using the watermark ballots would be January 1st, 2024. This will allow counties to use up the paper stock that they have before they have to buy the watermark stock, paper stock. And I would move that amendment.
Senator Fasco. Okay, Senator Reichman.
Thank you again.
Wait, I'm sorry.
No.
We got a motion, we have a second on the amendment. Senator Peterson seconds. Senator Reichman.
Thank you. I guess my question is, why do you really need a watermark? Then secondly, I'd be interested if the Secretary of State office would weigh in if that's permissible.
On this, Clay?
You don't like to.
Mr. Chair, we have nothing of substance to say. The timing was our only concern on this, that some counties do have paper stock they bought ahead, but I believe the timing amendment would solve that concern. And if the body wants a watermark on ballots, they'll get on there.
Okay. Senator Fasco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Hildebrand, so did we address the issue of every county does things a little bit differently? And so did we address the issue of would it be one person, one company within the Secretary of State's office that would buy the paper, the watermark paper, or would each county election officer make that decision, Mr. Chairman Hildebrand?
Clay, answer that.
Again, Clay Barker from the Secretary of State's office, for those listening. Senator, each county would be responsible for buying their own ballot paper because they all have different variations of the equipment and their own vendors, but the Secretary of State's office would put out a standardized requirements for the watermark that would be standard for every vendor. And we've checked with the vendors, they can do that.
Other questions or comments? Senator Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not really a question exactly about the bill, but in the bill, the ballots are required to be preserved. What is that current statute? What are the current timeframes that ballots have to be preserved for?
We're not on the bill, we're on the amendment,
Okay.
but
I can wait.
here in a minute.
I can wait, sure.
Okay. Any further questions on the amendment? Not seeing any. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Against nay? Passes. Now we're back to the bill, and your question is very valid, Senator Straub. So,
Restate or,
yeah, would you restate?
what is the current timeframe that ballots have to be preserved for? Because I see that there is language in the bill that the official ballots shall be preserved and used as the official ballot suitable for purposes of any audit or recount.
Senator, federal law sets a minimum of 22 months that ballots and ballot-like materials must be preserved. State law states they must be preserved for all elections, or to me, local is a little different, but for elections for 22 months, secured, sealed, and can only be opened by a court order. So most counties have them in a locked cage. And then at the 22-month mark, this is one of the few statutes that mandates destruction of the records by a bipartisan board. So those ballots are only kept for 22 months, then they're destroyed. with a board watching it, and I believe the intent there was to not require counties to have a large amount of secured space that's just filled with boxes of ballots and other materials.
Hang on a second, Clay.
Follow up to
Quick
that.
follow-up.
So that's state statute, correct? What do other states do with their federal ballots? Are there different timeframes that they must be kept across other states?
Senator, I couldn't answer. I know some states also have adopted the destruction at 22 months, but I can't speak for all of them. I could have our staff try to find that for you.
Yeah, I think it is relevant to this bill because I know there's been a lot of questions concerning the 2020 election, and we're quickly approaching that 22 months. And I do appreciate that that language is in here, but if there's an opportunity to extend that 22 months to, say, 36 months, 3 years after an election, I think, most tax records have to be kept for what, 7 years, for federal purposes. So I would say, I think it would be maybe an idea to extend the requirements of the timeframes that official ballots must be kept. And I think it's part of the security of the election to put the watermark on it to make sure that we still have official ballots that can be counted and audited multiple times after an election.
Well, maybe you could help us just get some background on that, and then there's opportunity on the floor. Okay, Senator Longmire?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Clay, you indicated in a previous question that you'd had conversations with the paper manufacturers, and they do have the ability to put the watermark on. Did you happen to inquire about price difference?
No, Senator. Mr. Caskey called all the vendors of the voting equipment in Kansas. They all said that they've had, some other states have passed watermark bills. They have the capability of getting watermarks on the paper, though the paper vendor may not always be the same as the equipment vendor. I do not have any cost estimates. It'll cost more, but I don't know how much.
Safe to assume it will cost more, and
Yes, they said the ballot paper will be a little more expensive. I don't know what little means.
it's silent on who pays for that, so I assume that would be the counties.
Yes, Senator, counties are responsible for buying their own ballot paper.
Thank you.
Hey, Andrew, could you just do a little research in the next day or so on how many states that have watermarks? I don't know, Senator Hildebrand might have that, but I just, I thought that'd be good for the committee to see. Okay, let's see, we're back to Senator Fasco.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So other than the watermark piece, Jason, what other language measures are in this bill?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the bill also had a required hand count audit of a sample of the paper ballots if they are tabulated by vote tabulating equipment. And then there was also a prohibition on any poll books that do not require a handwritten signature.
Any further questions or comments? Senator Hosher?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In regard to that last point, so the issue of signatures, page 2, line 18, isn't there language still that says the use of poll books not requiring a handwritten signature shall be prohibited? Okay. That's concerning, especially in respect to disability rights advocates. Is there an adjustment to the language or something in that regard? Because I know lots of times there are differences as far as those signatures and capabilities.
Senator Hildebrand, you want to comment, or?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at this, and Clay can maybe back me up if I say something incorrectly. But we had a discussion after we had this hearing with the Secretary of State's office, Representative Clay Barker, and that's already in statute other places about what that requirement is. So it could be anything from, if someone was a quadriplegic, it could be a signed affidavit or something like that, or it could just be an X or a mark, whatever someone uses as their signature.
Okay. So All right, so that language then doesn't necessarily apply, is that what we're saying?
You want to say something, Clay, or are you good?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, you're good? Okay.
Okay. Do you want to stand up, down? Okay,
Getting a lot of exercise today.
that's good. Okay.
Other questions or comments?
I do have one
Go
follow-up.
ahead,
then.
Senator
Okay,
Hoster,
and
you got the floor.
just to go back that, in regard to, we have an undefined fiscal note, then it sounds like, at this point, unless there's anything new that's been forwarded.
Go ahead, Jason.
Mr. Chairman, yes, I believe since the cost of this bill would mostly be borne by the counties, there is no fiscal note for the state.
Thank you.
Okay. Senator Fresco, do you have a question?
I do, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, believe it or not, I kind of like the watermark piece of the bill. My concern too, Senator Holscher, with the Disability Rights Center of Kansas, in the bill, and Jason, if you could help with this, you know, it on page 2, line 18, again, where the use of a poll books are not required, a handwritten signature shall be prohibited. And I understand Senator Hildebrand has said they could put an X but I kind of see that as those who are not literate at some point, because there are laws that are that you can mark a X, and you can even have a poll worker help read a question on the ballot and mark an X. So, but how does this particularly, that language on page 2, line 18, apply to people with disabilities that, you know, their handwriting is shaky? And I guess that's my main concern, of making sure that people with disabilities are able to cast their vote.
Go ahead, Jason.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, my understanding is the practice for a handwritten signature is any mark that indicates the voter's intent that that is who they are and that they are signing the poll book, regardless of the manner in which it is executed or what the actual mark is, as long as it's a acknowledgement by the voter that that is their signature for this purpose, should be sufficient. I'll defer to Clay if he has anything further to add.
Is that good, Clay? You want to exercise?
Senator, we had the same interpretation that by handwritten signature, it incorporates all the rules about signatures. It just means the voter has to actually be there and mark the book, that's them getting the ballot.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Okay, we got a motion and a second. I thought we didn't.
We're not on the bill yet. I had a motion or a second to the bill. We're just.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, do we have a motion? Just slipped one by me there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we move Senate Bill 389 as amended out favorably for passage.
Do I have a second? Have a second? Okay, Senator Straub seconds it. Questions or comments? Not seeing any? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against, say nay. Passes. Okay, 389 is moving forward. Let's go to 390. It's in a different folder, I believe. Okay. You want to give us an overview? It's in the back of, there was 351 and 390 that day. There's two of them.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Senate Bill 390 is the bill directing the Secretary of State to develop an affidavit system for the handling of ballots received from voters. That would require any person in a local election office who handles such ballots to be required to sign the affidavit when they are transferring those, and the affidavit would include the number of blank ballots, spoiled ballots, provisional ballots, the name of the person from whom they were received, and the location where they were received. This would go into effect on July 1st of this year.
Okay. What's the pleasure of the committee on Senate Bill 390? Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have an amendment. Number 1.
Okay. You want to make a motion on that?
I'll make a motion, we adopt this amendment.
Do I have a second? I'll second it. Okay, go ahead, Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you remember back when we were having the hearing on this bill, Senate Bill 390, there was some confusion over who actually touched the ballots and who was responsible. This is an attempt to clarify who actually would be required to sign affidavit after handling the ballots.
Okay. Do we have questions on the amendment? Senator Reichman.
Thank you so much. Could you go over this with me again? Who actually handles the ballots? And then what we're going to have here is have an affidavit, make sure they signed it, that they were the ones that actually handled. Am I correct on that? Okay, thank you.
Chain of custody is what is.
Chain of custody. Okay, thank you.
So are there any other? Okay, Senator Fascado.
So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Hildebrand, do you anticipate that this would require the election offices to hire more people to do this?
Go ahead, Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, this is something that most election offices do to almost to the full extent. As now, the only person that would sign it is the person that actually handles the ballot. So unless they hire someone to handle the ballots coming in or out of the office, they would not have to hire somebody to do the affidavit.
Go ahead, Senator Fascado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So like at an election poll location, there's a captain who kind of takes those provisional ballots and then they have another person with them. But are you talking about at the election office after ballots have all been collected, then another person is signing the affidavit? I guess I'm just trying to figure out at what point you're talking about, or are you talking about at every contact point?
Go ahead, Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, for example, an election office receives 1,000 ballots in from the vendor. Then someone will sign an affidavit that they received 1,000 blank ballots. So then to use your election captain scenario, whenever that election captain if they received any ballots from the election office, they would record them and then sign them. So would the person delivering those to the captain. And then when they returned them, it'd be the same.
Any questions? Senator Reichman?
Bite the apple one more time. When I was looking at Deputy Assistant Secretary Clay Barker in this bill, he says additionally, election workers charged with transporting any ballots, including casts, provisional, blank, spoiled, or void, must maintain a chain of custody records that were filed with a county election official. And then he mentioned where it is. These forms include the names of election workers, number of ballots received, dates and times, locations of pickups, delivery of the ballots, and signatures or initials of election workers. And so, I don't know, I guess my question was this, looks like to me is that, unless I'm not understanding this bill, we already got this in place.
Senator Hildebrand?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To my knowledge, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, it's not in statute, so it could be or could not be done at each election office, but it also goes one step farther. It's not just at the polling place where you're with the polling captain. It also is when you receive the ballots from the vendor. That's where it picks it up.
The way I see it is, say you get 1,000 ballots in, and you use 100 ballots at the polling places, you should have 900 ballots left over, but if you got 899, there's a question, where'd that other ballot go? Is that the kind of, you're wanting to document if a ballot was destroyed or if something? And so I guess on an auditing side, this would be kind of like controls in place to account for if a ballot, every ballot. Does that help? Or?
Yeah, that does help. I was wondering if Clay Barker would come and respond to that. I would be interested in his input on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I think Senator Hildebrand's correct that there's a scattering of statutes that address what we call chain of custody. That phrase isn't actually used. This makes it clear what the rule is and gives our office the authority to do rules and regulations which would standardize the process or the minimum requirements across Kansas. Each county could still have their own forms and maybe their own internal processes, but this would, in one place, standardize it. And we know how important chain of custody has suddenly become in the nation about ballots, and this just centralizes it in one place, where before it was sort of a scattered, implied rule from different statutes.
Senator Hosher and then Senator Strop. Senator Strop, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And sorry to keep harping on this, but I think the intent of this bill is very good, but who currently is ultimately responsible? The county election officer, the local election officer, or the Secretary of State in the integrity of our elections?
Senator, the elections are run by the 105 county election officers, so they're ultimately responsible for having chain of custody procedures, managing their staff, making sure it's done right. The Secretary of State's office, our election office only has 4 employees. They give guidance. They have a lot of expertise, but they don't try to manage the elections. That's up to each county.
Okay. And I had one more question here.
Go ahead.
Now I slipped my mind. Sorry. I'm trying to think here. Come back to me.
Okay, we will. Further questions
I
or
know.
comments?
1 second.
Senator Fasquedo.
Thank you. Just for clarification, okay, so a lot of times those individuals at the polling location, they're just hired on they're just poll workers who get that little money and a lunch that they get that day. And so although in my district, each voting location does have a captain, but we're not requiring the volunteers to do this work, are we? Okay.
Well, my belief too is the Secretary of State's going to set up the rules and policies, how it works. Each county can have a different looking document, but there's steps. I think this is great. I mean, this gives you a complete chain of command of what's, you're going to develop it, the policy on it, and, it's going to be, we're going to know where the ballots are, and there's never going to be, at the next election, this won't be an issue because we'll have the chain of command. If you have, in banking, we always have a saying, if you have 2 loan officers in charge of the loans and that loan goes bad, they're both going to blame the other guy. But if there's one guy in charge, it's his fault, and, we're going to know who's in charge. And, if there's a ballot missing and there's not a reason for that ballot missing, then, we'll be able to track that down. But I think this is great. I think it'll work well, and I don't think there'll be any problems, so. Further questions, Senator Straub?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It came right back to me. So I just want to make sure we're not shifting the responsibility from the local election officers to these poll workers, that ultimately the county election official or the county clerk or election official is ultimately responsible. And could this help expedite audits?
So, Senator, the county election officer is responsible for running the election, and then you'll have the polling place judges will have certain responsibilities. Bipartisan teams that pick up ballots will have certain responsibilities. And I agree with the chair's comments. The way we envision this is we'll ask the counties for some input and ideas, but then essentially a cradle to grave for ballots, a tracking of each step. It could help with audits. It depends exactly what you're auditing. If it's the process, yes, it would help. If it's just counting ballots, it probably wouldn't apply to that so much, because there you're just looking at what the tabulator and the comparing it with what the ballot actually has on it.
Well, the way I could be wrong, but I would think counties would like uniformity where they're all doing it similar. And to me, I think it's better. I mean, if one person leaves that county and goes to work in the next county, it's still going to be done the same. So I don't know. I like uniformity. I like chain of custody process, but that's just me. Further questions or comments? Not seeing any. We do have a motion and a second on this amendment. So all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Against, nay? Okay, the amendment passes. We're on to the bill. Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a second amendment, and this is the final amendment on this bill.
Thank you. You want to explain it?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. What this bill will do is it will provide a penalty for anybody that would falsify any information on the affidavit once the affidavit is signed. And I will give a little bit of background. I know a lot of my constituents are concerned, and they'll say, well, has this ever happened? And why do we need to do it now? I can tell you when I was a county commissioner that this did happen, and that we had a county clerk, election official, that actually changed the affidavits, but because it was no penalty, there was nothing that we could do. So I have experienced this firsthand, and that's why I'm offering this amendment.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Do we have a second? Senator Peterson seconds it. Questions or comments on this amendment? Senator Fascadell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to the Senator Hildebrand carrying the amendment, so did you consider this? So with COVID, my election office called me and said, do you know any people who are willing to, work the polls? Because a lot of people were afraid to do so. And so with the penalty added, did you think it might make people afraid to come and volunteer? And I know at one time serving on the elections committee, another year we talked about implementing young people to work on on the polls. So would this scare them away, particularly because, what if that, I know we're not on the watermark bill, but what if, their signature got misconstrued or just anything happened where they did sign it or didn't sign it, but it's all confused, and now then me and you, Senator, have to go work the polls. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hildebrand.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment does not penalize someone for incorrectly filling out an affidavit or for forgetting to sign something or putting the wrong date. What this would do is if your poll captain signed an affidavit that said this is how many ballots they received, turn that into the election office, and someone at the election office looked at that affidavit and said, oh, these numbers aren't right, I'm going to change them, and change them without the poll captain's knowledge and consent and signing off on it, that's where this would come into effect. A severity level 9 non-person felony.
Okay, Senator Straub? Oh, was Senator Hoser?
I was in conjunction to what was just asked. Can you refresh me what that looks like as far as a level 9 non-person felony in terms of punitive, or in terms
Go ahead,
of
Jason.
what that punishment is?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I believe the level 9 is on the grid as not prison time. It's presumptive probation, is my understanding. It's a very low-level felony on the grid. Level 1s are the most severe. Level 10 is the least severe.
Are there fines?
I would have to double check on what the fine amounts would be.
But then, okay, that made me think of something else. So if it's a felony, I mean, that's still part of their record that follows them in terms of jobs, that type of thing?
That's correct. It would be a felony on their record, and the ramifications of that would follow through with employment. I will point out that most of the election crimes currently on the statutes are low-level felonies.
Thank you.
Senator Straub, then Reichman, then Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make sure this doesn't apply to honest mistakes. I know these poll workers are volunteering, and even though they are compensated, it's something they might do once a year. They might do once every 2 to 4 years. If someone mistakenly put, say, a provisional ballot in a locked box and then forgot at the end of the day to report the number of provisional ballots, say, they missed a handful of them, would they be, I mean, or could they be held, is this that must be with ill intent to change the outcome of an election?
I think they'd have to knowingly violate the law, but I could be wrong. Senator Hildebrand.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. They have to alter the information first, and then the intent to hinder. So there's 2 parts to it. So.
Senator Reichman.
Thank you very much. My concern is a little bit more towards Senator Schwab, and also it seems like we've been, so many times we've been attacking indirectly or directly, whatever, our election officers and our county ones, and so many of them, they really worked hard and done well. There was a lot of problems in some other states, but I don't, know of any that's going ahead and violated what this is going on here. The maker of this amendment said he knew of one. I don't know how long ago that was. And I never heard it in the paper, and it doesn't mean it wasn't there, and I'm not insinuating you're not telling the truth. What I'm saying is that I think we're making a lot of laws and put more things on there, and I really don't see the need for this. Thank you.
Senator Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My intent was to, no pun intended, to just reaffirm what was said, that they had to first alter it, and then they need to have the intent to hinder, prevent, or defeat a fair election. So a simple mistake does not reach that level of culpability.
Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I don't have the exact date for the good senator from Meade, but the Secretary of State's office could go and pull Cherokee County. There was an election that I did not, as a county commissioner, sign off on the certification, and that was the reason why, was because of the affidavits being altered. And this in no way is a reflection of the 105 current. I just know in past history this has happened. So I would say probably most of them do a very good job and work very hard. But we all know there's always sometimes a bad apple. And we want to make sure that that bad apple is not encouraged to do it, that there is a reason for them not to do it in the future.
Okay. Any further questions, comments? Senator Hosher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the revisor, isn't it already illegal in Kansas to falsify an affidavit? It is, okay.
Yes, generally, this would be specific to these particular types of affidavits.
And then I guess, I don't know, ironically, coincidentally, is there something to be said for the fact that if you get a felony, you lose your right to vote? Relative to what we're doing on this? Okay. I mean, that is correct, right? You
Right.
lose your right to vote with a felony, any level? Okay.
Further questions, comments? I think we're ready to vote on the amendment. On amendment number 2, all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Against, nay? It passes. Okay, what are we doing with, is there any more amendments on 390? Not seeing any. Do we have a motion? Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we pass out Senate Bill 390 as amended favorably for passage.
Do I have a second? Senator Straub seconds it. Questions or comments? All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Against, nay? Okay, it passes. Does the nays want to be recorded? Nope. Okay, you'll get to carry that bill. And I've got somewhere I got to be here in a little bit, and I think we're going to hold off on any more bills till tomorrow. We're about done. We've done a good job keeping our slate clean, and we're about through the election bills.
Oh, man.
Thank you, committee. We're adjourned.